Welcome to the Airline Pilot Podcast. I'm Jason Ambrosi. Every July, hundreds of thousands of aviators descend on Oshkosh, Wisconsin to take part in EAA AirVenture, turning it into the busiest airport in the world. Anytime you have passionate pilots gathered in one place like this, there will always be ALPA pilots. For many of us, aviation is more than just a job. So ALPA is committed to being at events like EAA AirVenture to connect with our membership and the next generation of airline pilots. Last year, we caught up with several ALPA members who were participating in the show. And as we gear up for this year's AirVenture, we wanted to share their stories with you. Each guest today brings their own connection to aviation history. From a retired United Airlines captain flying the classic Ford trimotor, to honoring the legacy of World War II in a C-47, to airshow pilots. We'll start with them introducing themselves and their aircraft.
My name is Skip Stewart. I fly for FedEx in the MD-11. I fly a highly modified Pitts S2S, an airplane that I modified and built myself in air shows all over the world. I like to call it a seemingly out of control, crazy low-level air show. I got involved in aerobatics really through model airplanes. My interest in airplanes started when I was very young, and the only outlet I had, since I couldn't be a pilot yet, was to build models. And that became remote-controlled airplane models, which you fly. And once you learn how to fly a remote-controlled airplane, it's all about aerobatics and tricks and showing off for your friends. And you have to keep it close to you because you have to see it to control it. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually flying, airshow flying with a model airplane. So when I was about 14 years old, I went to an airshow for the first time, saw a guy named Leo Laudenslager flying a laser, which I had a model of, and it, for some reason, never put two and two together that this is a model of a real airplane, and the real airplane flies like the model. So that just was an epiphany that I could take what I really enjoyed as a kid and do it as an adult for real. So that was the inspiration, and I became an airline pilot so that I could afford to do that, and just got lucky that I happened to be successful. People want to watch me fly, so that's just icing on the cake.
Bill Sleeper, United Airlines, retired in 2017, and retired off the 747-400. Yeah, here at AirVenture, I'm flying a 1929 Ford trimotor, offering rides to the general public. Another one of our United pilots, Bill Thacker, I was giving a line check to back in 2015, I think it was, from San Francisco to Tokyo, and it turns out he was one of the trimotor pilots. And we got to talking, one thing led to another. He said, hey, you might be interested in getting involved with the trimotor, and call this number, which I did, and here I am. I have a fair amount of tail wheel experience. The airplane is not nimble by any means. It's not difficult to fly, but it has its own personality, and the EAA requires the pilots to have at least 100 landings in type before they turn you loose with it.
My name is Billy Janus. I am currently a Delta 73NB out of New York, so co-pilot on 73 out of the three major New Yorks. Currently, we're sitting in the cockpit of Placid Lassie, the C-47 here at Oshkosh. So I've been flying this airplane since 22. I'm new compared to some of the members. I had just moved home right before I started at Delta. I had been flying for a couple of airlines up in Alaska, flying some other Douglas airplanes. And so I showed up here with this group in about 2022. They happened to need a co-pilot for a weekend, and I was waiting to start at Delta, and I had a whole bunch of free time. So,
my name is Jeff Linebaugh, and I fly for FedEx. I'm a 767 captain in Memphis. This is a P-51 Mustang. It belongs to the Commemorative Air Force, and there's a group of 5 of us that fly it, giving ride experiences and displaying the airplane at air shows throughout the country. The airplane is painted in the colors of the 343rd Fighter Squadron, which was in the 55th Fighter Group, 8th Air Force in England. This gunfighter, it was named by the squadron commander of the Lone Star Gunfighters, an F-4 unit in the 70s, who owned the airplane before it became part of the Commemorative Air Force. I got involved in it about 15 years ago, did a lot of work behind the scenes to try and help keep the airplane going, and ended up working up into the pilot role. There's an airplane called the North American T-6 Texan, which was the trainer for this. I had a lot of time in that. I rode in the back seat of this airplane several times, and then it was learn how to start it, get in it, and go, and good luck, don't bend anything.
Martin Gerhard with United Airlines. I'm a 777 captain out of Houston.
Steve McGarry. I'm a envoy E-175 FO out of DFW. So we are the World War II Airborne Demonstration Team. For the past roughly almost 30 years now, we've been demonstration parachute operations out of original 1940s aircraft, and our ongoing mission to remember, honor, and serve the generation from World War II and veterans of basically all wars at this point, but we were primarily here to preserve the memory of the World War II paratrooper, show the world how it was done back then.
I've been here for 16 years. I went through their jump school in 2008. We run 2 jump schools twice a year, one in July and one in October, and it's a 9-day course, so it's very similar to what the guys went through in World War II, except it's condensed, obviously. I think they took them a month to do it or so, and we do it in 9 days.
In Army jump school, if you go to jump school for the United States Army, it's going to be a 3-week course. We take what the Army teaches you and we condense it down to a 9-day course. So it's or 5 days of jump, 5 days of ground phase, and then 4 days of jump phase, basically, is how we run it. I was in the Army. I joined the military back in late 2003 and then reported to my radar school at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and saw a beautiful C-47 sitting on the ramp there and thought, who does that belong to? So I finally asked the right guys, and they said, it belongs to the Airborne Demonstration Team. You should go talk to them. So I got in touch with our original founder, Richard Wolf, who was running the school back then, and I came through the parachute course here in 2005, and I've been with him ever since.
I actually spent a month in Normandy about 20 years ago, and I was standing at one of the drop zones envisioning the mayhem and the airplanes and the ships, and I just got this wild thought thinking, I'd like to jump from a C-47 just once. Never in my wildest dreams thinking I could ever do it. Speed up 10 years later, I was a volunteer with the Commemorative Air Force, got to talking to somebody there about D-Day and paratroopers, and he asked me, he said, have you ever jumped? I was like, well, I've done a couple of sword jumps, but I'd really like to jump out of a C-47. And he said, well, there's this group in Oklahoma that does that. And I was shocked. I didn't believe it. So I ran home that night and I looked them up online, and sure enough, I found the World War II Airborne Demonstration Team. Immediately called the phone number, and I also talked to our founder, Sergeant Major Wolf. And I asked him, I said, you guys jump from a C-47? He goes, yes, we do. And I was like, are you guys mostly military guys? He goes, well, yes, we are. All the instructors are prior service. I was like, well, I'm just a civilian guy. Can I do this? He said, absolutely. You just have to show up and go through our jump school. I signed up the very next jump school. That was in January of 2008. Planning to do only my 5 jumps to graduate. Fell in love with it, and 16 years later, I'm still doing it.
Our team on the ground in Oshkosh was able to catch up with these unique individuals and ask them specific questions related to their participation in Oshkosh AirVenture. First, they asked, what makes these aircraft unique, both in its design and its history?
I started with a Stockpits S2S, and I took it apart all the way down to the frame and sold everything except the frame and built a custom airplane out of it. The Stockpits is only good for +6 and -3 Gs, and I do close to +12 and -7 in my show. So just about everything that I modified was for strength. A few areas I can make it lighter, and then also more horsepower, and then a cool paint job, of course, because it's got to look good. This is a small biplane. Curtis Pitts designed it back in the 40s, and then it's been improved over the years, a lot like a Porsche 911. You can see the very first Pitts and the latest Pitts, and you know that they're related. But it's a small, high-performance biplane that used to be the pinnacle of aerobatic aircraft until the monoplanes came out in the 70s.
The Trimotor is the first all-metal aircraft that was produced for passenger service in the 1920s. It has 3 engines because the technology back then the engines did not produce enough horsepower to make it a 2-engine airplane. And the reason they had 3 is that they felt it would be much safer to have 3 engines. One could fail and the airplane could still operate on 2 engines. Started out in passenger service. It was actually Eastern Airlines, the predecessor of Eastern Airlines' very first airplane. And it was passed around in the late 20s, early 30s between different domestic airlines, and eventually became obsolete when the DC-2s and Boeing 247s were evolved. So the airplane wound up going south of the border and stayed south of the border for a couple of decades and came back and was converted to a crop duster. Spent a number of years doing that, and that wound up being a smoke jumper airplane up in Idaho. And there's a whole lot of history of this airplane. Also was a Boré bomber for the same company, but the Boré bombing was eventually discontinued and they wound up making it a smoke jumper. Then after that, it was campaigned as a ride-hopping airplane. And in 1973, I think it was, when it was destroyed. Yeah, it was destroyed at an airshow event in 1973. The EAA bought it and spent 12 years restoring it, and it's been on the air tour circuit since 1985.
These airplanes that have such amazing history, part of the reason is because so many of these airplanes were used during World War II. So it's really cool that we actually have the specific history of this particular airplane. This airplane is painted up just how it was back in 1943 when it came off the factory floor in Burbank, California. So this airplane, though, it participated in some of the most major campaigns of World War II. It was there for Operation Varsity, also known as the D-Day invasion. This airplane towed 2 gliders, I believe it was, dropped paratroopers. It was there for Operation Market Garden. It was there for dropping supplies over Bastogne. This airplane was a part of Operation Repulse. And it really saw a lot of action during World War II. Eventually, after the war, came home, was a freighter for a long time, hauling all sorts of stuff around the U.S. for a number of operators, until one day they blew an engine. The company couldn't afford to put a new engine on it, and it sat derelict.
They followed up with, where has this aircraft taken you, and any memorable stops or interesting routes they may have made?
This year I'm doing 20 air shows in multiple countries. So I usually start in February, and the last shows go through November. And then in December, I do the airshow convention. So I really only have 1 month off a year that I'm not doing something airshow-wise. I've flown in Panama, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Martinique, St. Martin, China, United Arab Emirates, literally all over the world.
Well, we take it all over the country. It's been to the West Coast. After AirVenture, it's going to be working its way through Virginia. It'll come back to Oshkosh for the winter, and then we're putting together the travel plans for the next season, but it could get back out to the West Coast. We're not quite sure yet. They can be a lot of work in moderate turbulence. The airplane has no yaw damper. They only have elevator trim. And I always like to bring a co-pilot along on the long trips where there's turbulence, because I can say, hey, how about getting a little bit of forward tri-motor time? You got it. So that's my autopilot, is the people I bring along in the race seat.
Yeah, so this airplane, it lives on the road in the summertime. It just depends on what they've got going on. So we do all sorts of other things with this airplane, including dropping paratroopers. Not always current paratroopers, but people that dress up in the reenactors that dress up in the full garb and still jump from these airplanes with round canopies. We go to air shows like here at Oshkosh. We were just at Geneseo, where we'll make passes. We'll also do formation flights with other DC-3s. We do quite a few different things with this airplane. So the airplane goes wherever kind of people want it to be. This year, though, our tour started off in a couple of air shows down in Georgia. We went to the Toccoa Air Show where we were dropping actors from the series Band of Brothers who were getting trained to be actual jumpers to go jump for Normandy. I went to the Maxwell Air Force Base Air Show. I went to Sun and Fun in Lakeland, Florida. It came up to another air show in Georgia, back to New York, and from there, we hopped all the way across from Oxford, Connecticut to Presque Isle, Maine. We went to Goose Bay, Canada, over to Reykjavik, Iceland, down to Prestwick, Scotland, and then over to the UK, and then eventually ended all the way up in France, Germany, and then all the way back. Just the crossings alone were about 27, 28 hours of flying. So this airplane's flown about 120 hours so far this year. We're here in Oshkosh, and we still have more events to go later this year.
For the listeners who have not been to an air show like this, can you describe the performance and what goes into preparing for an event like Oshkosh?
Well, I think they're seemingly out of control, low-level air shows that I'm trying to get the spectators emotionally engaged in my well-being. I want them to wonder if I'm going to make it. I want them to feel the excitement and the danger. It is a dangerous thing to do. So I've designed my show to look dangerous. I'm doing it safe to me. I'm wondering if I turn the stove off or I'm going to have for lunch while I'm flying. To me, it's super easy. And I'm honestly a little surprised when I get finished with my show and people are like blown away. Oh man, you barely made it here. I mean, that's what I've tried to do. You come out of a maneuver with plenty of altitude to finish it, but you fly it towards the ground until it just looks like you're barely, and then you start pulling, but you got plenty of speed and it's super safe. But if you miss the ground by an inch, people think it's barely made it. And that's to me what it's all about.
You can go to a museum and you can learn about history, but truly seeing these things operate, smelling the oil as it starts up, and then really getting the opportunity to share with people, what these truly heroes that we have of the greatest generation, that they went through flying these airplanes. We had a bunch of patches for going over this year, and it said unarmored, unescorted, and stuff like that, because none of these airplanes had it. We got to fly some World War II veterans earlier this year, which obviously we're losing quicker and quicker. But we got to fly a gentleman earlier this year that the last time he'd been in a DC-3 was over, I believe it was Holland, bailing out of it on fire and holes bigger than us in the side of the airplane. That's why we do this kind of stuff, is to honor those guys and be able to just help people appreciate what those gentlemen went through. And it's pretty cool to fly it too.
During air shows, we put the airplane through its paces. We do aerobatics, low-level loops and rolls, cubinates, combinations of those maneuvers to try and show the capability of the airplane and the performance. It's a special privilege to get to do it for sure. We love the opportunity to be able to share the airplane with people. We just love to be able to share the experience especially with other pilots, because it is an amazing flying airplane. It's simple to fly in a lot of regards. It's very high performance, especially for its time period. And to be able to share what the experience was like for guys 19 and 20 years old to be going into combat in Europe, defending our bombers, is something that, it's just a special privilege to be able to share that experience.
The team inquired about how their individual experience flying this historical aircraft compared to modern airline flying.
The DC-3 C-47s are really an amazing airplane. I mean, obviously, they've been going for a long time. This particular one was built in 1943, and besides a couple years where they were waiting to put some engines on it, it's been flying pretty much that entire time. So it's an amazing thing. There's actually a number of other Delta pilots who fly these aircraft, and it's cool to be a part of that group. I fly the 7.3 at work. Everyone jokes about the 7.3 being a dinosaur, but this is a little old school than that. I always used to joke with people when I came to Delta, the thing I appreciated most was an autopilot in a bathroom, which, as you notice, this doesn't have that. So it's a really cool airplane. It's an amazing history. It's a big, relatively speaking, easy airplane to fly with a lot of amazing history and stuff like that. It's got some challenging aspects that have to do with mostly managing the airplane from engine stuff. As I said, there's no autopilot in here, so everything you're doing is hand flying. Like when we brought it back across the Atlantic, all the guys at Delta, American United, and everywhere else that are doing those long haul flights, it's only 7 hours for them, and they get to go in the back and take a nap and everything else. We did 10 hours straight, and all we made it was between Goose Bay, Canada, and Reykjavik, Iceland, and like you said, no autopilot for us.
You don't get the kind of vibrations in modern airliners that you do in this. You don't get the smell of avgas. You don't get the visuals of the propellers turning and starting and smoking a little bit as they start up. There's a lot of sensory experiences associated with this airplane, but the big one is that we fly it low, like 1,000 feet above ground. It's not fast. We take off at 80, cruise at 80, land at 80, and it's just this very interesting, unique experience that you don't experience anyplace else.
To me, the biplanes are the best airshow airplanes. They're strong. The Pitts S2 in particular, no one's ever broken one in flight that resulted in a crash. So you can fly it with confidence, knowing that if you do break it, then you've flown it harder than anybody's ever flown it in history, which you'd be pretty arrogant to think that. But I have broken a lot of things on the airplane, but it always brings you home. So I like that. The other thing I like about it, it has a lot of drag, so it doesn't go in real fast. So you can do a low, tight show. And with most of the modern monoplanes, they're so fast, but the show gets really wide and really tall. And I like doing things low and tight and in your face. And I think the biplane has the best ability to do that.
That's a completely different thing, of course. The 767 is big and smooth and very automated. This is quite the opposite of that. It's a pretty high-performance ride, gets off the ground in a hurry. It's back to the basics. Everything is manual on the airplane. You've got to watch all the gauges. You've got to manage the engine, all the different systems on the airplane. It's all up to you.
And finally, the team asked, how do you pass down your love of flying for the next generation?
How do I pass my passion for aviation on? I try to seek out primarily kids like seniors in high school or maybe in college that are interested in it, that maybe can't afford to do that or his parents aren't really up for it, and get them to help me out around the hangar. Start them off sweeping and hand me tools and cleaning airplanes, and actually own a Cessna 152. And in exchange for that, if they have attitude, aptitude, and ability, I will give them a free private pilot's license. And if they continue to be successful and interested, then I can also have a multi-engine airplane that I can give them a multi-in. Then they start flying the twin to the air shows to build their multi-time. And I've done that with 6 or 8, I'll call them kids because I'm 56 years old. And most of them have gone on to successful careers at Delta and United, American, Spirit. One of them is a high-level mechanic, wears a suit just to work at American. So they help me out, I help them out. It's full circle. And I hope that I instilled in them that once they become successful, that they'll reach back and help somebody out as well.
We all do this because we love it. I always tell people I fly big airplanes to be able to come home and play with little airplanes, because this kind of stuff is what we all appreciate doing, because it's not just about flying the airplane. It's about meeting a lot of really good people from friends all over the place. That's where you come to Oshkosh for the airplanes and you stay for the people. And it's the same with operating these kind of airplanes. You just meet friends all over the country. You get to visit them, and with our line of work, that makes it a lot easier too. So it's really just, I think it's all great.
I've done just about every job on this team up to this point. Honestly, I enjoy the jumping. I enjoy the jump operations. I enjoy crewing the aircraft, you name it. There's days I go up there, throw on a parachute and go out after my stick. There's days I go up there, put on a safety harness and just throw the stick out. It's a blast no matter what I do, because no matter what I do, I'm still getting to do this job of this aircraft. And the kind of the extraordinary thing about what we do, we are one of the only organizations that operates a World War II era aircraft and does exactly the same mission with it that they were doing in World War II. We train to the same standards as the U.S. government does. We go through ground schools, we go through parachute schools, we do refresher courses, we do everything that the Army does. Just we do it on the civilian side, and we do it in 1940s uniforms. So there's refresher trainings. It's just like being a pilot. Just you don't land with the airplane.
We take this airplane all over the country. And so I've been to cities and parts of the country that I wouldn't otherwise go to. One of the fun things I got to do with it was doing a tour stop in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. And we got a call from the Spaceport of America saying, hey, would you mind flying the trimotor over here? We'd like to get pictures of you with the trimotor in front of the Spaceport of America. So we did. And that was a very unique experience that was only associated with the trimotor.
Thank you to each of our guests for sharing the passion and dedication it takes to keep aviation history alive. If you're preparing to travel to Oshkosh yourself this year, or watching from afar, look for all the ALPA members keeping the rich legacy of aviation alive at EAA AirVenture. We'll see you there. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, reach out to podcast@alpa.org. To listen and subscribe to the Airline Pilot Podcast or learn more about ALPA, check us out online at alpa.org or find us on all major podcast platforms. Until next time, this is the Airline Pilot Podcast. Copyright ALPA 2025, all rights reserved. Thanks and have a safe flight.